Thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited to bring today's webinar with our partner TX3 Services on leveraging validation lifecycle data to drive actionable business insights. Our presenters today are Eric, Peter, and Dan. Eric is the managing partner and co-founder of TX3 Services. His focus is on developing client and partner relationships to provide best-in-class technology-driven IT solutions to life sciences industry. Peter is a test tool specialist at Merck with many years of test experience across telco and finance companies. At Merck, Peter is responsible for test tool engineering, support, analysis and strategy, and tool integration. Dan is a senior value stream architect at Tasktop with over 20 years of diverse technical experience. At Tasktop, Dan helps companies across a wide variety of industries bridge the gap between technologists and the business through the power of value stream management. And with that, I will pass the baton to Eric to get us started today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laurel, and thanks everybody for joining today. Today I'm going to start with talking about a concept to improve the computer systems validation process. I'm just going to cover this process at a high level in the course of 10 to 15 minutes and talking about how we can incorporate data to improve the antiquated process that right now leverages documents in a manual process for this process called computer systems validation. So if you look at the traditional approach to computer systems validation, it's manual intensive and leverages documents, either paper documents or electronic documents. And when we talk to our customers, and we've done polls and industry surveys, about 70% of our customers are still using a manual document-centric process for computer systems validation. Some of these customers have taken this paper-centric process and digitized it, so they're using electronic PDFs and signing PDF documents, but it's still a very manual document-centric approach. And what I'm going to talk to you about over the next few slides is how to decompose those documents and take the inherent value of the data that resides in those documents to leverage that data to improve the overall process. And I also want to talk to you about the inherent risk that you're exposing your companies to by retaining that process, that very antiquated process that really adds no value aside from checking off the box that you're doing computer systems validation. Way back when computer systems validation was brought to the marketplace or was a requirement, it was a requirement, but it was also in the inception of computer systems validation was really to add value. But we've gotten away from that, and now people do this process really just to check the box that we've done it. And the idea that this process is supposed to add value is really gone away. But all the data that we're collecting, there's value to that data, but we're losing it because it resides in these static documents that we really can't extract. So if you look at this diagram, this represents the process that's most typically used in computer systems validation. And the left-hand side is your GAMP-V model with your requirements on the left side, your test protocols in the middle, and then once you're in production, your change control process. And each one of these little icons that shows a stack of paper is typically a document, and in the middle is your requirements trace matrix. What I'd like to talk about, and just to talk about a very simple example of how you can decompose these documents and leverage some of the data underneath. And I'm just going to use the requirements document as a very simple example. If I author a requirements document and I'm done writing that document and I want to send it through a review and approval process, and let's say Laurel is in my review and approval cycle and she's going to do the first review and approval of this document, and let's say it has 1,000 requirements in it, and I send it through the review and approval cycle and she's in the process of reviewing it, there's no way for me to know how far along she is in that review and approval cycle. She could be, if there's 1,000 requirements, she could be done reviewing 900 of them, but I don't know that. All I know is she's approved it or not. But if instead she's approving each individual requirement and looking at it at the electronic record or individual data element or requirement basis, and assigning an electronic record, or I'm sorry, an electronic signature on each of those requirements, and she's done 900 of them, I could very easily look at that requirement in the system, or those requirements in the system, and say, oh, Laurel's done 900 of them. She's 90% done. And that adds value to me. I can see how far along she is. In addition, now that I have those approved requirements, I can do all kinds of things. I can create libraries of approved requirements that can be used elsewhere. So for example, let's say I have a set of requirements that are common, login requirements that might be common across different applications in my company. I can create a library and reuse those requirements across different projects and not have to necessarily send them through another review and approval cycle, saving time and money. So there's lots of different things now that I can, if I decompose that requirements document and think about it in a completely different way and start to look at the data and the value of that data, there's all kinds of things that I can do. Another thing to look at is when we talk to life science companies that are and people that are doing computer systems validation, one of the things that seems to be the most troublesome in that process and the most complex is maintaining the trace matrix. So a simple use case or a simple example I wanted to bring to light here is if you have an application in production, in this slide in the orange boxes, I have a number of different applications that you might typically have to support an application in production. So you might have an agile tool, a requirements tool, a test management tool, and so forth. So let's say you're in production and there's a change request that's logged into your ITSM tool. That change request may turn into a user story, that may turn into a user requirement, that may turn into test cases, that may have associated defects. Well, ideally, if this application is validated, you're going to want to link all of these different elements together and think about how you would do that in a manual, paper, or document way. That becomes a very complex manual task to do. But if you can use a tool like Tasktop to move that data between those underlying applications, you can automate that process, and now it becomes very simple to do and automated. So it's very easy to maintain that trace matrix. In addition, at TX3, we've developed a compliance portal that allows you to maintain the review and approval process on top of these different tools. So with our tool Vera, you can actually be presented with, you log into the compliance portal and you're presented with a dashboard, and now you can do your review and approval process for all of those assets for the different DevOps tools underneath without necessarily logging into the different DevOps tools. So if you can, for example, review and approve a user story from Jira or a defect from Jira in the Vera platform, the consequences of that e-signature, locking it, for example, in the audit history, for example, are managed through the Vera portal. So it's all done in one place. And again, Tasktop is used to move the data between the underlying tools. So there's lots of value now to moving that data and exposing that data in different places. Another benefit is data aggregation. So just a little bit different view, and I apologize for the, the ugly green for the personas at the top. But let's say you have a number of different people interacting with the different applications underneath that, again, are supporting your application in production. You have these people interacting, and data, again, using Tasktop to move the information between the tools, you can now consolidate that data into a common repository. And now you can use that information and present it in different dashboards and start to do analytics. You can do what-if scenarios. You can start to do different planning, resource effectiveness. You can see your offshore teams and how effective they are. You can look at your different development groups and see which teams are the most effective. You can do all kinds of things that you simply can't do if you're managing this process with documents. So again, going back and looking at the traditional way that people do computer systems validation, what we want to do is break apart these documents and start to look at them from an elemental or electronic record standpoint. And we can lock this data down. We can trace it from element to element very easily from a database standpoint. And one of the things that I want to talk about and make sure that we address is there's hidden risks in the document approach. People feel very comfortable in this antiquated approach, and they feel comfortable because it's the way they've always done things. But there's hidden risks in the way that they've always done things, and this perceived risk is there seems to be a disconnect. And I just wanted to highlight some of those risks. So one risk is human error. Another risk is the process, this manual document-centric approach. What we find is the process is not followed in a consistent fashion. And one of the biggest things that we see is when auditors come in, they look to make sure that the process is followed time after time. And when it's not followed, they want to make sure that you can defend why it's not followed. And inherently, there's rogue groups in a large organization that go off and do what they want to do, regardless of corporate policy or whatever. And that gets companies into trouble. So having a consistent workflow that is automated, it allows you to configure a way to deviate if you want to, but if you want to let a specific group go off and do something different, it's controlled. And then if an auditor comes in and asks you why you let that group do that, it was controlled, and you can defend why you did that. The other thing is loss of data integrity. I would argue that it's much easier to falsify a paper record than it is an electronic record. And then last is this process of the manual computer system validation process is extremely slow and extremely costly. So the document-centric approach to validation is costing companies money and increasing your compliance risk. Although it feels comfortable for people, it's really an ineffective approach to doing computer systems validation. So keys to the transition to moving people to a data-centric or electronic-centric view of computer systems validation is, number one, you need to understand the technology, and the technology moves very quickly. But I would argue that other organizations or other parts of life science companies are doing this already. If you look at R&D and clinical trials, different parts of pharmaceutical, medical device, biotech companies are leveraging this new technology each and every day to propel companies forward. But for whatever reason, QA and computer systems validation parts of the organization are laggards. So it's our vision and our drive at TX3 to make sure that we can propel that one part of the organization that seem to be laggards and pull them forward and leverage technology that exists today to become more effective and efficient and catch up with the rest of their organizations. Be honest and about the comfort and the perceived risk. Just because you're comfortable doesn't mean that there's less risk. In fact, I would argue that the fact that you're comfortable means that there's more inherent risk. Compare the risk profile of both approaches, and again, be honest about those risk profiles, and look at the additional benefits that the underlying data offers the organization. That data that resides in those documents that has been locked away for years, start to use it. So this is just kind of a silly slide that I put in just to kind of hammer the point home. Is that instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. We have these conversations with people every day, and it's frustrating, but it's also, for us, it's opportunity to start to help educate people to what's available from a technology standpoint, and it's pretty exciting to help educate people on what's available and start to make this process and turn it around and move people forward with this technology. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Peter, and happy to address any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So Peter.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Petr Srajb. I work as a test tool engineer, and I would like to share with you how we use Tasktop in Merck and why we chose it, or maybe not why, but how what contribution it makes for us. Just a disclaimer: we don't use the full capability of the Tasktop, just the really minor part. Still, it really helps us to be faster and efficient. Next slide, please. Yeah, we have it Tasktop like since fall 2018. There is a mistake. 2018 we had Sync, which is another tool from Tasktop, and replace it in 2018. We use it as an integration tool between different testing tools. Mainly because at those times there was no API orchestrator on the ALM side. Basically, it was forbidden, and we needed a tool that will connect our tools in our portfolio. And currently, we use it mainly for ALM and Jira integration, partially for Tosca, and there was some couple of POCs on other tools. Next slide, please. There is a number of projects that we used for in last year or last year and a half. A number of items that basically help to either create or update. And as I said, we use it mainly for ALM and Jira bug synchronization, and a lesser part for requirement synchronization. The reason is that Jira is mainly used for by developers team and by agile part of the company, and ALM is a validated tool, and that basically is recognized as a one source of truth in our company, and most of the documentation regarding testing is pulled from ALM only. There was a couple of POCs for ALM Tosca's requirement synchronization that was not pulled to the production yet. There was some really small POC for demand tracker, which is a tool that tracked some demands from business side via gateway functionality of the integration hub, and currently there is a small proof of concept to connect it, Microsoft project to Jira. On the picture, you can see basically the complexity or lack of complexity, just defects on ALM and Jira side. Next slide, please. Yeah, we had to integration hub qualified. That's something that pharma companies do because not all tools are allowed. We have to use our tools in different or just in the strict way under documentation with the proper installation and user guide on place. We had to set up all the processes around what we do and how we do it, even with the synchronization other tools. So next slide, please. Yeah, there is basically what we have it for, and what we see, most or the big advantages of the tool. Basically, projects and testers and developers do not have to deal with both tools. However, it has one exception. I will go to that. So just the testers go to ALM, and developers are in Jira, and basically it works fine for both sides. Easier project documentation, as I said, most of the reports are taken from ALM, so they don't have to pull it to some Excel sheet and then sign it. And on ALM side, we have electronic approval. that allows to approve it, either defects or requirements, or any other items in it. So it really helps us. Filtering on the defects on the synchronization, it's really helpful because not all defects should go to the ALM, or our projects wish not to go every defect to ALM. So there is a filtering scenario, and we use what's really good, automatic user translation. It means that basically all persons or all people in the company are in Jira, but not all of them are ALM. So when there is some discrepancies between it. So we use this translation to whenever some individual is not in ALM, so his ID is translated to defect manager, that and quality persons are okay with that. There is some issues on our side. Jira projects vary a lot, so there is no the same projects in Jira. It's because that Jira is used as in Agile, and our DevOps guys basically allows to project to like bend it or tailor it to their needs. And there is basically one part where individual has to go to ALM and close the defect, because from quality perspective and from process perspective, the closure requires basically a couple of details that needs to be filled into ALM, and that's why the closure has to be in ALM only. Next slide. Yeah, we have some plans. I would like to promote it through the project teams and even through the company to use it like in a more broader way than we have it now. We would like to add more tools into the all synchronization, and I would like to create a better guidelines for the team and best practices that we gain within last year and a half, and of course upgrade to 20 something, because it's from support perspective and from the feature perspective. So next slide, and I think that's it from my side. So if you have any questions, please refer to in the end, or by any means necessary. Thanks.
And I guess that's my turn. This is Dan Feminella with Tasktop. We're going to talk about what's the next steps, what's the future with Tasktop, where do we go from here after what Eric and Peter have talked about. There we go. So we want to talk about a product we call Tasktop Viz, and it's really, the businesses are fighting for their lives. It's giving you the visibility into what is happening between what Eric was talking about, where you have all of these processes going back and forth and you're automating them, and then how Peter has talked about how they've automated them, how 27,000 items have been moved or created between, could be up to 4 different tools. What is really happening kind of at the higher level. So at the bottom of this slide is Tasktop Hub, and that's what both Peter and Eric talked about. And it is tying your tools together, integrating your tools, getting the data to flow between the tools. Above that, we now also have Tasktop Viz. So now we can see if there are bottlenecks in your process. So just tying systems together doesn't mean that they're efficient. They're just, the data is tied together. So with Viz, we can see where the bottlenecks are. Okay, so what Viz is a prescriptive approach to flow metrics. So it records how your work is progressing, it models the business in a view of all the products in the portfolios, and you can replay the history to uncover any problems that are impacting the business underneath the covers. So it's kind of real-time, scalable end-to-end metrics, kind of showing bottlenecks. When you set it up, it's just point-and-click modeling. You don't have to dump your data to an external database, no ETL. We can point to your live systems because of our connector kind of architecture and the way that we've been connecting tools for 13 years. We know how to kind of pull the data from them without having to extract, to a database. Scalable, reliable, like I said, about 58, 60 different tools that we can talk to now, and it's built for, your enterprise IT. It's cloud-based, and we can grab the data that way. So when you go to the doctor just doesn't take your temperature or your heart rate or your blood pressure. The doctor looks at many different metrics, and then they come up with a kind of a diagnosis. If you just look at single metrics of IT, it might not help you kind of find out where the problem is. So we have our 5 flow metrics. Flow velocity is how much value is being delivered over a certain period of time. So how many things were finished? How many things were completed? How many features or defects or tasks or risk was finished in an X amount of time? Also the flow efficiency. So the efficiency is how much kind of wait time and how much work you're doing. With our connector architecture, in looking at your internal tools, we also understand all of the wait states and all of the statuses. So we know when something is new into the process, when it's being worked on, when it's paused, when it's maybe waiting for the next step, maybe waiting for an approval or waiting for the tester, and then when it's done. And with those 4 status types, we can figure out how efficient you are. Also, the flow time is how long it took to came from request to release. A lot of people talk about cycle time. Cycle time is when a team gets a task, they do it, they finish it. That team may be very efficient and very quick in doing that one task. But what about how long did that task wait before that team picked it up? Or once they're done with it, how long did it wait for someone to approve it, or wait for the testers to get to it, or wait for someone to release it? So flow time is the entire time from start to finish, request to release. Flow load is your work in progress. It's your WIP. It's how many things you have in the air at any one time that you're working on that's not closed. Those are your Sunday night headaches. Like, I have so much stuff to work on tomorrow. And then flow distribution is, where is the work happening? Is it happening in features or defects or risk or technical debt? This is our kind of these are our metrics. This is how the metrics look. And you can see the 5: flow velocity, flow distribution, load, time, and efficiency. We also put business results on there. So you can tie it to your revenue, tie it to your costs, tie it to how many people you have per team, tie it to your net promoter scores, your happiness score. Are teams happy or sad? And it really affects the way the business works. Now, there's a lot of information here, and I can't get into anything, but I'm going to give you 2 real-life scenarios from customers of what we found with their data in helping them. So the first is a healthcare company, and they wanted to drive process and tool changes. So this was their kind of first look at the results. In looking at it, you're not sure where good things and bad things are, but we have our flow advisors that work with you and go through and explain everything that's happening so you can dig into it. So you learn to see, you learn to improve, you learn to scale. But what was happening is, with this chart, red or orange are defects and green are features. So in August, they were doing 75% defect work and 25% feature work. And in a business, you really probably want to get more features out than defects at any given time. So they noticed that something was wrong here. And when they dug into it, their release cadence was off. They weren't releasing the releasing the features quick enough. They had them as marked as done, or they had them marked as ready, but they weren't released. So they changed the process, they changed the flow, and they were able to see that now, okay, we really are doing 50% feature work, 60% feature work. And it was just something that they had felt was wrong. Like, they didn't think there was anything wrong, but they knew a lot of features weren't coming out and they couldn't pinpoint it. So with digging into the process and the flow. So what also happened is, when we looked at the efficiency, it showed that the teams were 100% efficient. No one is 100% efficient. When someone gets a task, a defect, a bug, a feature, a story, whatever they're working on, there are wait states. It waits for testing, it waits for development. Then we were able to help them put more statuses into their process, so it gave a better visibility of what was really happening. And what it showed is when we put the statuses in there, that it was really the business analyst was the bottleneck. They were getting overworked, and they weren't able to keep up with all the kind of feature requests that were coming into them. So what this allowed to do is, and this is a quote from the customer, is like getting visibility into our flow, distribution motivated them to take action, right? But the biggest thing here is they were also able to get a head count, but not during the budgeting cycle. So they were able to prove to their management that we needed another business analyst, and these were the numbers to prove it. So that's one story. The next is kind of a what if, or what is really happening behind the covers. Different customer, you can see that half the graphs aren't filled in because I believe this was 11 days after we implemented. These are the numbers that started coming out. Oh yes, 11 days. So the flow load again is the WIP, it's your work in progress. So it showed that they had 1,000 items active, waiting, being worked on. So that means they've started working on it, but they're not completed. And people didn't think that they had 1,000 features, 1,000, stories, or that they were working on. It just seemed wrong to them. So in digging into it, they clicked on the Analyze Load button, and it showed them that a story type there were 591 of them sitting in the done state. They had at one point 933 sitting in that same state. And it's flagged as done, but it didn't mean done to them. When they dug into how they configured it, the done state was really a waiting state for them. It was really waiting to be implemented. So even though they flagged things as done, implementation or state was the final state. And they looked at that and they went, well, no, it's really kind of throwing everything off. We really feel that this is wrong. So they changed this is again, a what if scenario. They changed their done status from a waiting state to really a done state, a completed. So a what if. And once they did that, if you remember, the green was the biggest part of that graph. That went down to maybe 50 items. And it was really, they had 260, mostly defects and technical debt in a working state, in a wait state. So they were able to prove that, to get that monkey off their back, to say, look, we don't have 1,000 things waiting. So what you're allowed to do is kind of reveal what's happening behind the covers and kind of see where your bottlenecks are. And the IT product managers, this is amazing. I love it. And again, this was 11 days after we implemented. So what is Viz? It is prescriptive metrics. It is turnkey for rapid time to value. It's out of the box metrics, and it's instant integrated visibility. So, and that's what I'm here to say. Laurel, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I just want to say thank you again to Peter, Eric, and Dan for presenting, and to our partner TX3 Services for co-hosting. If you would like to see or know more about Tasktop Hub, Viz, or TX3 Vera, please reach out to your Tasktop or TX3 contacts, and we will get a personalized demo in the books.